Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. So Jaron boots Ennis, dominates and destroys Eimantas Stanionis in 6 rounds to become unified IBF and WBA World Welterweight Champion. Let's talk about it. Now, up until Boots' last 2 fights against Avanesian and Chikadzian, I was very high on him. I was sure that he was the future. I was saying in videos that he's the most athletically gifted welterweight I've seen for many years. He's got power, speed, you name it. And he's a very big guy at the weight. But then, as I say, he fought Avanesian and had the rematch with Chikadzian. And all of a sudden, I had people turning up in the comments saying, Boots Ennis is a hype job, or he's overhyped. He's nowhere near as good as you were making him out to be. They were saying that after the Avanesian fight, and after the Chikadzian rematch, they were saying it even more. At which stage, even I started to question how good Boots really was. But more than anything, I figured that Boots was just totally drained at the weight because against Avanesian and Chikadzian, there was no speed there. He was sluggish, he was flat-footed, the hand speed wasn't the same, the combinations weren't the same. He looked like he was forcing his punches. And so I was saying he needs to move up. Forget about continuing on at welterweight, he needs to move up. So going into this fight with Stanionis, I said in one of my videos or live streams that I think Boots is the better fighter than Stanionis. Much better fighter. More talented, more powerful, and so on. But if he fights like he did in his last 2 fights against Stanionis, then he could have a serious problem. An upset would not surprise me whatsoever if we get that version of Boots. Now, on my most recent live stream, not the one that I briefly started yesterday evening, which I'll talk about later on, and then stopped and deleted, the last proper live stream, somebody in the chat told me that there was no IBF rehydration limit for this Stanionis fight. Whereas for Boots' last 2 fights against Avanesian and Chikadzian, there was an IBF rehydration limit. This is where the IBF only allow you to rehydrate a maximum of 10 pounds by the morning of the fight. But with this fight here, presumably because it was a unification, IBF WBA, that IBF stipulation was not in effect. So Boots was able to hydrate fully, not just by the morning of the fight, but actually they held the real weigh-in in the morning the day before the fight. Then they had the ceremonial weigh-in the evening before the fight. So basically, Boots and Stanionis, of course, would have had at least 34 hours to rehydrate. And when you're rehydrating an enormous amount of weight, like particularly Boots Ennis's, that extra time makes all the difference. Because think about it, for Ennis's previous 2 fights, he had to keep himself dehydrated basically until the morning of the fight. About 12, 13 hours before the fight, he had to keep himself dehydrated up to that point. Whereas for this fight, he only had to do that, let's say 34 or 36 hours before the fight. So he had way more time to rehydrate because there was no fight morning check weight with the IBF. Now, I don't know whether that alone accounted for why Boots Ennis looks so much better in this fight against Stanionis than he did in his last 2, but I have to imagine it was at least a contributing factor. Because from the opening bell, it was the Boots of old. It was the Boots that I was so high on, that I was so sold on. He came out and he had loads of energy in his legs. He was moving around the ring. He was peppering Stanionis with shots from both hands. He was showboating. He was enjoying himself. He was landing uppercuts. He was landing body shots. He was controlling things from distance and breaking Stanionis down. He did get caught with the odd shot here or there. Boots is not Pernell Whitaker. But for the most part, it was a fantastic display. The athleticism was there. The energy, that's the most important thing. The energy was there to be able to fight that way. The speed, he looked so much faster in this fight than he did in his previous 2. Now, there are some people who think that the reason Ennis didn't look so impressive in his last 2 fights was because his dad told him to go in there and knock those guys out, and that's why Ennis was being flat-footed. Personally, I don't particularly think that. And the reason I say that is because why would you want to look unimpressive? Boxing the way that Ennis did in this fight, he was able to beat up his opponent and get the knockout in 6 and look impressive doing it. Being flat-footed and just plodding forward, loading up and looking slow and sluggish. He did not look impressive doing that in those fights, and he didn't get the opponent out of there any quicker. So I personally am not sold on that idea. I think the weight has a lot more to do with it, as in he was struggling at the weight in those fights and was therefore lethargic and lacked energy. However, Boots, in a post-fight interview after beating Stanionis, said that the reason he performed so well against Stanionis is because he had a live body in front of him. That's the way he described it, almost inferring that he lacked motivation for his last 2 fights. Another thing which I found out over the past couple of days is that Boots, for the first time, employed a nutritionist for this fight with Stanionis. So maybe that allowed him to make the weight even easier still. You combine that with the lack of IBF check weight on the morning of the fight, and again, you can understand his energy levels being a lot higher for Stanionis. And maybe, like he says, he wasn't as motivated for his previous 2 fights. I still think that we're not going to see the very best of Boots until he moves up to 154 pounds. And this was a very good version of Boots. But when he moves up to 154, I think that's when we're really going to see something. But as it is, the Stanionis performance was very impressive. Stanionis was never in the fight. He had a brief moment, maybe in the last minute of round 4, where he was working his jab and he started to land some hooks to head and body on Boots Ennis. But when you looked at the slow-mo replay at the end of the round, Boots was actually riding the punches. He was rolling his head or moving his head the same way as the shots and taking the sting off him completely. That's another thing that was largely absent from his previous 2 fights with Avanesian and Shikadzian. In those fights, he was taking the punches flush. He wasn't rolling with the shots. Here he was. And Stanionis has got pretty quick hands, folks. Yeah, he's a pressure fighter and he comes forward in straight lines and whatnot, but there's hand speed there. Yet Boots' reflexes were good enough. Again, he's no Pernell Whitaker, but his reflexes were good enough to ride the shots and move his head in the same direction as the punches whenever Stanionis did land. For the most part, anyway. There was a couple of occasions where he wasn't able to ride a shot, but in most instances, that's what he did. He took the sting out of the punch by moving his head in the same direction as the punch was coming at him. So yes, a very impressive performance by Boots Ennis, a return to form for sure. And from my perspective, if this IBF rehydration limit will not be in effect once more if Boots unifies with Mario Barrios or Brian Norman Jr., then maybe it is okay for him to stay at 147 pounds to get those fights before moving up to 154. Because prior to this, I was saying, no. Boots needs to move up immediately. He needs to even forget about the Stanionis fight. Just move up. He looks dead at the weight. But again, in unifications, apparently, the IBF rehydration limit on the morning of the fight is not in effect. I don't know what Boots weighed in the ring against Stanionis, but I want to guess it was over 170 pounds. Okay, he's a massive welterweight. It's crazy what these fighters do. If you see the picture of Boots Ennis on the Wednesday of fight week and compare it to the picture of him or the video footage of him at the ceremonial weigh-in on Friday evening, the difference is absolutely massive. Okay, it's crazy how much these fighters are able to drain themselves and then rehydrate. Incredible amounts of weight. You see some of these guys in real life and you're thinking, how in the world does this guy get down to this particular weight class? Anyway, those are my thoughts on Boots Ennis' victory over Stanionis. I thought it was a fantastic performance. As I say, a return to form. He's been able to restore the faith that a lot of people had in him, including myself, prior to his last couple of fights. That's the Boots that I was so high on. That's the Boots that I saw winning world titles, going up multiple weight classes. Evidently, that Boots still exists. He showed up last night. But what say you? Were you as impressed as I was? If not, then you should have been expecting this type of display, right? You should have been expecting Boots to totally dominate and Stanionis to not have a look in, or not get a look in, should I say. You should have been predicting that before the fight, that it would be easy for Boots. If you weren't, then I can't accept you saying, oh, Boots' performance wasn't that great, because most people were expecting a competitive fight here based on Boots' last 2 performances. Not everybody. There were some people saying that Boots is going to destroy this guy. But the majority of people who I saw were saying this is going to be highly competitive. And therefore, the majority of you should have been impressed that Boots was able to exceed expectations. I'm impressed. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I look forward to reading your comments in the comment section. And incidentally, for those wondering why I started a live stream right before the opening bell of the Boots Stanionis fight and then ended the stream after about 10 seconds or 20 seconds, whatever it was, and then deleted it. The reason is because I'm away from home at the moment and I've only got one laptop with me, and I use a bit of software called OBS to stream with to YouTube. And I was watching DAZN in my browser. As soon as I opened OBS to start streaming, and then I switched over to look at my browser to watch the fight and do the commentary for it, the picture was encrypted. So DAZN have got some way through the browser to detect whether you're using screen capture software. Not that I was trying to capture the screen for the fight. I wasn't. I had different visuals on screen, right? But somehow DAZN have got like in-browser algorithms or whatever that detect when somebody's using OBS software, and they will encrypt the image, right, the video. So long story short, I couldn't stream and watch the fight at the same time on my laptop. Normally, when I'm streaming whilst watching a fight, whilst doing commentary on a fight, I've got OBS, the streaming software, open on my laptop, and I'm watching the fight on a different device. Whereas in this case, I didn't have another device to watch the zone on. I mean, I could have watched it on my phone. I suppose I got the app on there, but I didn't want to be squinting to try and see what's happening. So anyway, I went ahead and did the commentary without OBS, just as an audio file, without live streaming it, but I recorded it same way and uploaded that to my second channel. So if you guys want to hear my blow-by-blow commentary on Boots Ennis versus Stanionis, the link is in the description. Go check it out on my second channel. I did post the link to the video on the discussion tab of this YouTube channel as well, posts or whatever it's called. So yeah, that's the reason for me discontinuing the stream last night. And before I go, make sure you check out my most recent bit of exclusive boxing content on Patreon. It's a 3-hour film study on George Foreman. That's 3 hours of me analyzing video footage, not still images, actual video footage of the most significant fights in George Foreman's career and explaining and breaking down what made him so effective. It wasn't just brute force and physical strength and punching power. No. Foreman had a much better boxing brain and was much more crafty and clever, even when he was young, than people realize or give him credit for. And I break it all down in a 3-hour George Foreman extravaganza on my Patreon page. If you want to access that video and many other boxing film studies I've done, as well as countless podcasts and what have you, just head on over to my Patreon page, which is called The Brotherhood of Reason, and select the tier called The Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, there's no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, and it's very reasonably priced. If you just want to sign up for 1 month and then check out, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, don't miss out on my George Foreman film study. You can access that and my entire back catalog for a very cheap price. It's great value. All of the links are in the description below. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Make sure you guys like this video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. If you want to access this video along with hundreds of hours worth of other exclusive boxing content, as well as our members chat, just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called The Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store. All the links are in the description box below. And just a quick money-saving tip for Apple users. If you purchase your Patreon subscription on the desktop site or on Android, then you'll avoid the ridiculous 30% fee that Apple charges for purchases made on the iOS app. So if you're on iPhone or iPad, save yourself some money by buying your subscription on the actual Patreon website or on Android because it's a lot cheaper. Once you've made that initial purchase, you can then use the Patreon app on your iPhone or iPad thereafter to access and enjoy your content as normal.